This
is TLV1.
TLV1 radio.
Great mixer.
I like Tel Aviv.
This is still V1.
This is
Tel Aviv is a beautiful city.
Great city, great radio.
TLV1.
This is TLV1.
The Tel Aviv Review with Gilad Halpern.
Hello and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review, a program dedicated to the word, to the thought and to debate, where I, Gilad Halpern, engage in close encounters of the intellectual kind. Every week I talk to writers, scholars, thinkers, documentary filmmakers and other people who have done something to make our life a tad more interesting. And on today's show, we'll be talking to Dr. Nurit Hashimshony-Yaffe, a political scientist at the Tel Aviv-Yaffo Academic College, whose most recent study focuses on how Israel managed to clamp down on a prosperous women trafficking industry. Our second guest will be Dr. Giora Eliraz, a Middle East scholar from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and the Interdisciplinary Center in Herzliya, who specializes in Islam in Southeastern Asia, namely Indonesia and Malaysia. He will talk to us about the exchange between the Islamic center and periphery, mainly on issues like democracy and religion. This is our show today. Do stay tuned, and we'll be right back after this musical break.
Why don't you come on over?
You are listening to TLV1, broadcasting from Tel Aviv on TLV1.fm, and you're listening to the Tel Aviv Review. I am now delighted to be joined here in the studio by a political scientist, Dr. Nurit Hashimshony-Yaffe of the School of Government and Society at the Tel Aviv-Yaffo Academic College, who's here to talk about her most recent study that's currently underway, and it pertains to Israel's efforts to curb trafficking of women that proved to be rather successful. I mean, the efforts, not the trafficking. Well, both actually, but the efforts proved to be rather successful. Hello, Nurit, and thank you for coming.
Hi.
So, over a period of about a decade and a half, Israel has all but eliminated a phenomenon that used to be rather widespread, and that is women who migrated to Israel and were forced to work in the local sex industry and were often subjected to coercion and abuse. We can talk about a few thousands of women over the years. That used to be also in the news quite a lot, and it was something, one of the many problems of this country. And in this period of just under 15 years, thanks to concerted efforts of the government, and we're going to get to that, there's been a complete sea change. Just what would like to quote a report that was issued by the United States Department of State in July 2001 that said that the government of Israel does not meet the minimum standards for combating trafficking in persons and has not yet made a significant effort to combat the problem. Fast forward 13 years, in 2014, the same report, a similar report, says that the government of Israel now fully complies with the minimum standards for the elimination of trafficking. That's quite extraordinary. How do we explain this sea change? It can't be just down to goodwill, can it?
No, it's not just a goodwill, but it's also a goodwill. It's a combination of few local and international actors. It's very important to note the United States' role in this process, but also two others. One is the Israeli NGOs, and the other is government actions, both government and parliament.
Right. So before we get to the US role, which I find rather interesting because, it didn't have to play a role in it because the women came from underprivileged countries in the former Soviet Union and other places in Eastern Europe and Asia, and they were trafficked to Israel. And on the face of it, the United States had no role in it. But let's put it aside for a second and talk about the two other actors. You were saying the civil society here in Israel and lawmakers or government branches. So is this some sort of proof of how successful, this teaming up between those two sectors in society could be?
I think so. That's actually the reason why I came into it, because I was interested in civil society organizations and the way they work, and a few kinds of coalitions. And one of the coalitions I was researching was the coalition to fight human trafficking, especially women trafficking. And I think it's a good example of the cooperation between civil society and the public sector.
All right, so let's give us a lowdown of the process. So this, like I said in the introduction, this was a major issue in the public debate here in Israel, and human rights organizations were campaigning for some sort of government action against it. And what did this campaign consist of in the beginning?
The beginning was a few Israeli NGOs, civil society organizations.
We're talking about the 1990s here, right?
Yes, at the end, yes. Like 15 years ago, who were collecting data. And actually, Amnesty and the Israeli Women Network were most of the time collecting data about women trafficking. And then almost at the same time, there was the U.S. statement about Israel that you
the
just
Department
cited.
of State,
yes,
mhm.
yes. And then the two things actually converge into a parliament decision to establish a parliamentary committee that will deal with the issue. And then it was followed, like a few years later, it was followed by an intergovernmental committee of people from Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Interior, the police, and they were all working together. And, this is how it...
But one thing that we know here in Israel, and I might be a bit too cynical saying that, is that one way to avoid dealing with the subject is to form a committee, and that's how you never hear of it again. So what happened here? How did this prove so successful?
First of all, you're right. And that's why it's so interesting, because whenever we heard about the committee, we said, okay, so nothing will happen. And here something did happen, and it is a success story, as I want to call it. It's success of the policy design and both of policy implementation, which were both a part of the committee's work. Mm-hmm. The committee in the parliament and the intergovernmental committee.
So where did this committee succeed when so many others failed? What did it do? What did it require for it to succeed?
I would like to say that mainly two things. One was a pressure, bottom to top pressure from the civil society organizations. They didn't stop pressing. Mm-hmm. They collect all the data. They did great work. They joined the committees. They were all sitting around the same round table while the decision process was taking place. And I cannot underestimate the role of international...
but you can say that about so many other things, from the poverty rates in Israel to the occupation of the Palestinian territories to the treatment of African asylum seekers now in Israel. And still, it doesn't seem to be going in what I would call a positive direction.
Yeah, if I will compare it to the problem of asylum seekers in Israel, which I think it's a good example or a good case to compare to, because they are both, in both cases, it's we're talking about strangers, people who are coming from outside, who are illegal migrants, who are staying here against the law.
Who have no legal status in Israel.
Yes, so it's a good a case to be compared to. I think that in the case of human trafficking, we're talking about women. We're talking about women who came mostly from East European countries. Most of them, I can say all of them, were part of sex industry in Israel. And there was a consensus that it's something that should be eliminated. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one reason why it pushed through a success and not to failure.
There was a consensus that this is wrong and should be. There was not only a consensus, like a value judgment on the issue of saying this is wrong and should be handled, but also on how it should be handled.
Yes, the question of how was very easy to answer, because the State Department gave very accurate criteria of what should be done in the states outside of the United States. And there was also an incentive.
What are they?
The criteria are, it's a very long list, but the idea was that they have the criteria and they have an incentive for all those countries who are supported security support or any other support from the United States. Mm-hmm. There was even more details they should follow. And I think the incentive was very strong, and the government of Israel knew that it's not possible not to follow.
What was the incentive?
Money.
So America
the incentive was money.
Actually paid Israel money to curb this phenomenon.
Yes, but even more important, the U.S. policy statement was that countries that will not follow the criteria will not get any any further support in the future.
Okay.
And this is something that the State of Israel cannot afford.
Well, we're talking about the defense assistance and all that. So they basically said, the United States government basically said that if Israel doesn't follow meet the criteria set out by them to curb the trafficking of women, they will not get 1 single cent from them.
Yeah, they didn't say it in this way. They
Yeah.
said, I can cite it, they said, United States will not to provide non-humanitarian, non-trade related foreign assistance to any government that will not.
Right. Okay. So this is why you said that the United States government played a crucial role
Yes.
in this. How interesting. Okay. So how did this come about in practice? What did the Israeli government actually do to prevent this from going on? Because these women were smuggled into Israel. They
Yes.
never came as I don't know. First of all, out of their own will, or very rarely, and it wasn't. It was very shady all along. So, what measures did they actually take in order to combat trafficking?
I would say that it's not just that they were smuggled into Israel; they were forced. I mean, it's what we call a forced migration.
Yeah.
Maybe they migrate because they want better lives, but they didn't. Most of them didn't realize that what they're going to do is to be part of the sex industry and to be forced to work with any basic human rights.
Yeah.
So what the State of Israel did was actually. The first steps were mapping and learning the situation. It was backed by information from many other countries around the world, because we're talking about a worldwide phenomena. It's not just in Israel. And then they moved into a few steps, a few decisions. Some of them were legislation, minor and even major legislation, but this was the first step. Then they move...
criminalizing it, is that it? What do you mean by legislation?
Yes. And there was a debate what's best to do, to have any all minor changes in the existing law, or have new laws, but at the end they changed few laws that they will be able to bring people to court.
Yeah.
And then the...
not the women themselves, I'm assuming, but
no.
the
And
people
that was
who
a
are...
change, because until the beginning of the, 14 or 15 years ago, women who were smuggled into Israel or were trafficked actually were not looked as victims. They were looked as illegal infiltrators, and they were looked as prostitutes, and no one looked at them as victims.
And could be charged.
Yes. So the change was to look at the women as victims, also to take care of the traders or the smugglers.
Yeah.
Most of the traders, not the smugglers, are mostly outside of Israel, but the traders inside of Israel. The police had quite an important role in this. And also to have shelters for women.
Right.
That will protect them while they're staying here until...
And what happened to them afterwards? Like they were taken out of those brothels into shelters, were subjected to some sort of rehabilitation process, and then sent back to their countries.
Yes, but the rehabilitation process includes support by the government while they giving the evidence in court, and also kind of financial and psychological support. So,
was this did this usher a clampdown on the sex industry in Israel altogether, or were these foreign workers just substituted by Israeli ones and everything just remained the same?
It's difficult to answer, I think. I think in this case, we're talking only about migrant workers, or a specific case of migrant workers, of forced migration of women. But
So this, at least from this aspect, it has been addressed and tackled. You said earlier that some of the the big machers in this industry aren't in Israel at all. And when it comes to trafficking and migration and all that, it has to be an international effort or a multinational effort. So I'm assuming that looking at domestic legislation, as important as it may be, is just part of the picture.
yes, it is an international effort, and I mentioned the State Department, but it's also worth mentioning the UN with a convention that Israel was assigned to, and many other countries as well. And the whole idea was to eliminate or combat the human trafficking around the world.
Right.
In Israel, we were talking about a few thousand people or few thousand women a year, but we were talking about 2.5 million people in the world. So it's a huge problem.
So other, the global industry, if we can call it, of
It is a global
trafficking.
industry.
Yeah. So is it all going in the same direction? And Israel is just, just riding on this wave?
It's one path. Israel is one path, and it used to be easy to enter illegally into Israel through Egypt.
Yeah.
Since the border was closed, it's much more difficult.
Yeah, and we know that because of the asylum seekers from Africa. This is really striking, and it can do also, a lot of good press for Israel, whose track record on human rights isn't always spotless. Let's put it this way. Why do you think it's it doesn't get the attention it deserves in the media, both in Israel and abroad?
I'm not sure it doesn't get the attention. I think in some circles there is. It's very known that it was a success.
But you have to admit that if you take the asylum seeker, the African asylum seekers, which you said is a good parallel case, and compare it to the media attention that trafficking of women get, you can't really compare the two.
One of the reasons I got into it was because I did a research of 2 years about asylum seekers in Israel, and I was really very frustrated because nothing is working, and the state of Israel is doing all kinds of efforts to make their lives hard in Israel. Although the state of Israel was assigned to the UN Human Rights Convention.
Yeah, but that's deliberate. Yeah. They want to encourage them to leave. It's not out of... you can say that it's malicious, but it's one way to get them to leave too.
Yes, but the current situation is that we have between 40,000 to 50,000 asylum seekers in Israel. There aren't any asylum seekers getting into Israel anymore because the border was sealed. Yeah. So we have to do something with the people who are staying here, which are mostly Sudanese and Eritreans that actually cannot go back to their countries of origin. But I must say that I have the feeling that one of the things that are different between the two cases is that, and I'm sorry to say it, but when we talk about asylum seekers, we're talking about black African people. And when we talk about human trafficking or women trafficking, we talk about white women from East Europe. So I think maybe it's not admitted in this way, but the world, not just in Israel, is not acting in the same way or with the same standard.
You're saying that black men are being perceived as more of a danger than white women. Is that what you're saying?
I'm sorry to say it. I don't like it, but I think that's what happens.
Impression. Well, on this optimist note, we'll have to wrap up. Dr. Nurit Hashimshony-Yaffe of the School of Government and Society at the Tel Aviv-Yaffo Academic College. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
You fix your makeup just so. Guess you don't know that you're beautiful. Try on every dress that you own. You were fine in my eyes a half hour ago. And if your mirror won't make it any clearer, I'll be the one to let you know. Out of all of the girls, you're my one and only girl. Ain't nobody in the world tonight. All of the stars, you make them shine like they were. Ain't nobody in the world but you and I. You and I. Ain't nobody in the world but you. You stop the room when we walk in. The spotlight's on, everybody's staring. Tell all of these boys that wasting their time. Stop standing in line, 'cause you're all mine. And this evening I won't let the feeling die. I never wanna leave your side. Out of all of the girls, you're my one and only girl. Ain't nobody in the world tonight. All of the stars, you make them shine like they was. Ain't nobody in the world but you and I. You and I. Ain't nobody in the world. You keep wondering if you're what I'm wanting. You don't even have to try. Oh, you don't have to try. Don't try, don't try. You don't have to try. Oh, out of all of the girls, you're my one and only girl. Ain't nobody in the world tonight. All of the stars, they don't shine brighter than you are. Ain't nobody in the world but you and I. You and I. You and I. Nobody in the world tonight. Ain't nobody in the world but you and I.
You're listening to the Tel Aviv Review here on TLV1. Welcome back. I'm now joined here in the studio by Dr. Giora Eliraz, who's a research fellow at the Harry S. Truman Institute at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He's also a fellow at the Netherlands Institute of Southeast Asian and Caribbean Studies in Leiden and at the IDC Center in Herzliya. Quite a lot. He's a Middle East scholar specializing in the, say, Muslim periphery, especially Indonesia and Malaysia. Hello, Giora. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks.
We are here to discuss processes of democratization in the Arab and the Muslim world. This has come to the limelight with very forcefully over the last few years with the Arab Spring, etc. But it's almost a cliche now that people are saying that the Arab Spring has turned into an Arab winter, and the great promise of democratization hasn't met the great expectations. Can we really talk about democratization over time in the Arab world, or is it just like little manifestations thereof here and there without actually becoming or creating a process that's larger than the sum of its parts?
It's interesting that I enter into the issue of democratization in the Middle East through the Indonesian case, because for years I was very curious to know if the democracy activists in the Middle East find an interest what's going on in the far periphery of Indonesia that started its transition to democracy in 1998. And what is interesting that I found that I think since about 6-7 years ago, that there is a kind of, the democratic discourse in the Middle East that was this way or another was involved in viewing into Indonesia. And then it was interesting to learn that in Egypt in particular, I found that there was a real substantial discourse on democracy, but limited to various things that limited circles. Mainly, I think, secular-oriented. Of course, the Muslim Brotherhood talked a lot about democracy, but it is a great issue by itself. It's not a real democracy. Yeah. But this limited group of secular-oriented people really looked at Indonesia at that time and saw it and modeled in this way or another.
How is really Indonesia a fully functioning democracy, the way we know in the liberal West?
It's not fully functioning because we're talking about perspective of 16 years only. But I think that if you look from broader perspective, since late 90s, in 90s, you see that there is a thing that's substantial progress in this field, and I think that you can identify some significant, substantial, I think that's indicators that it's a real democracy.
Is Indonesia Muslim and democratic in the same way that Israel is Jewish and democratic? Are they experiencing the same problems? Because we are dealing with the contradictions of Judaism and democracy on a daily basis here in Israel. Do they experience the same things?
It's fairly speaking. I think the situation, theoretically speaking, I think it's much better. Since Indonesia...
In Indonesia?
Yeah. Since Indonesia, I think the most population are Muslims. We're talking about almost, it's 90% of population is Muslim. And in the Indonesian constitution, since the Declaration of Independence, although the Muslims are the majority, I think that Islam has no any kind of status in the constitution. And I think that the ideological perception of the state and the constitutionally, it has no any kind of preference on other religions. More than that, what is written in the constitution, that's the belief in Indonesia is a belief in one God. In one God in various things, this general term. To include,
not Allah.
Not Allah at all, to include Christians, Protestant, Catholic, Muslim, Hindus, Buddhists. And recently also people that adherents of Confucianism.
Well, what about, are there any Muslim clerics, Puritan ones, with a lot of political power who are saying, no, this is going in the wrong direction and are trying to incite some kind of reactionary backlash?
Okay. So I presented the current situation, but it's not so simple at all. If you try to follow the traces of the conflict and you come to 1945, the Declaration of Independence, there was a very severe debate and controversy at that time between the secular-oriented, I think, the group that led the revolution on one end and a very strong, it's called radical and even militant group that strongly opposed this opinion and tried to establish Indonesia as an Islamic state. It's still now you can find, I think, the manifestation of this conflict. It's what we're calling. It's what is interesting that it's the outcome, but all the time there is, I think, that overt and hidden conflict on this issue.
Well, what broadly speaking, very broadly speaking, you mentioned the secular Egyptians earlier, but what is the relationship between the Arab Muslim world and the non-Arab Muslim world? It is a relationship of center periphery. I mean, we are talking about Indonesia and Malaysia as the periphery of the Muslim world. Is it really also in normative terms that they are they see themselves as, and the center sees the periphery as inferior?
Yeah, really. I think it's really classical case of a relation between center and periphery. It's not simple at all. But generally speaking, really, there is, I think, some feeling of superiority, I think, of the center. And on the other hand, I think a feeling of the people from the periphery that they are latecomers to Islam, because Islam came introduced to the Malay Indian world around the 14th century. They don't speak Arabic, and the language of the Quran is Arabic. Mm-hmm. And more than that, it's also connected, I think, with the story, with the role, the significant role played by the Adramis. Adramis, people came from Adramawet, now the southern part of Yemen, that play a significant role in the development of Islam in Indonesia. They started to come at around 16th century. They play a significant role. And they was considered by the local...
Were they preachers who were sent there to disseminate the gospel of Islam?
Not just preacher, more than that. There's elite society, very sophisticated. They held very significant position in various kind of fields, including in the religious field. And they was considered by the local to be the model, I think, of the real Islam. Mm-hmm. And also they gave the impression to the locals that the people from the Middle East, they are the models. And until now, I think that it's like, I think, that very complicated relation between the periphery and the center. It's what is going on. The periphery, the Muslim in Indonesia, for example, they're looking toward the Middle East, not out about it. Many of them are what they call pilgrims of knowledge, going to learn Cairo or the Saudi Arabia and so on, make pilgrimage to Mecca, and reading it's in this way or another. They are exposed to Arabic media in this way or another, but it's going mainly in one direction. People from the Middle East on this periphery of Indonesia and Malaysia looking toward the Middle East. On the other hand, I think that Malay Indonesian world, Indonesia in particularly, is almost a closed box for the people from the Middle East.
What do you mean by closed box?
They have no idea about Indonesia. I think that's a very general terms like Indonesia is the biggest Muslim state, something like that. Or Indonesia is the one edge of the Muslim world, and from Indonesia to Morocco, something like a symbolic, metaphoric, no more than that.
But you say that there are some ideas that are trickling from Indonesia to the center of the Muslim world, maybe to the margins of it, but you can really trace a process of exchange of ideas between the center and the periphery, and this time round coming from the periphery to the center.
Mainly it's going in one direction. What's the point from my point of view, since I have a great interest in history of ideas, transferring of ideas from one territory to another, I thought that now that beginning of what is called the Arab Spring, now it's really very interesting to look deeply into it and to see if ideas from Indonesia are coming to the Middle East. I remember myself I wrote just at the first day of the Arab Spring in Egypt. I tried to speak for behalf of the Malaysian and Indonesian students in Cairo at that time. And I wrote there. It was also published in Indonesia. So now you can look around.
Were they involved in any way in the Arab Spring?
No, not involved.
But they saw it as maybe something that they can easily relate to, coming from those countries that have been more progressed democratically. And when the whole wave of democratization and democratic discourse came to the fore, did they not see themselves as part of it? It's
connected, I think, with what the previous point we talked about center-periphery relation. Since they are coming from the periphery, mainly in the idea to acquire knowledge from the center, they tend to be on the sideline, not to put themselves in the center, to say we are the teacher and so on. And when the sort of dialogue on democracy started between Indonesia and Egypt at that time, it was just soon after the beginning of the Arab Spring, the Indonesia, the state, it is a dialogue between equal partners. So
I see. There's one big elephant in the room, or rather elephant in the Middle East, and that is Turkey, which is a Muslim country and a democracy, but unlike Indonesia, is not in the periphery. So what's the role of Turkey in this matrix?
I think I'm not sure that I don't think that Turkey is directly involved. For example, you're coming back to the case of Indonesia.
No, but I'm talking about the shifting of ideas and the.
No, so I think that the democratic discourse in the Middle East, I think not influenced. It's mainly by the Turkish case. I think it's somehow connected with more global discussion about democracy, waves of democracy that came at that time. I think from East Europe, the new countries, and after I think that what started then, I think in the mid of 1970s, with the starting of the third wave of democracy when Portugal became a democracy.
Right.
So it's to be connected. You have to see in the global context, not I think in the regional one.
No, but I'm talking about, say, the sentiments of young, progressive, democratic Arabs. Do they look up to Turkey at all as a potential model?
Some of them looking, but it's not connected mainly with the Turkey, not at all. I think it also for some of them. First of all, for the secular, it's not a model. Turkey is not a model. Nowadays, it's contemporary Turkey is not a model. And for the Muslim brother, it's complicated because in Turkish there is a kind of amalgam between a secular, I think, the secular model and Islamic model. And the Muslim brother in Egypt, just from the beginning, they tried, I think, that in this way or another to establish, I think, that to reach to what called Islamic constitution. It was not easy to them to do it. So in the first step, it was only preliminary step, but I'm not sure that there's also a kind of controversy when the Turkish started, I think, to propagate their own model. I think there is some reaction. I think the model at that time, the beginning of the Arab Spring among the Muslim brothers.
Right. So now going back to Indonesia itself, do they deal with similar phenomena that we see around the world, also in Muslim communities in the world, but also in the Middle East, with the rise of radical Islam? Is it a phenomenon that's equally burning in Indonesia as it is in other places in the world?
Yeah, just from the beginning, I think that it's coming. I think it's more striking the moment of transition to democracy, because the authoritarian regime of Suharto, I think, as they used to behave in a very forced way against radicals. So once I think the authoritarian regime vanished, it was, I think, that at least at the beginning, it was much easier to the radicals to raise their voice, to be active, try to use opportunities. So the first years of transition to democracy in Indonesia are very difficult in this sense. Terror, rising of Islamic militant groups and so on, they are still there. They are at the periphery. I think what is interesting that this young democracy succeeded to surmount, I think, all the preliminary difficulties of that time. I think that's the interesting. All the time, Indonesia. It's a very interesting case that you can find the bad guys and the good guys. Yeah. All the time there's a conflict, but usually I think the good guys win.
What was the method of the good guys? Have they opted for a more inclusionist type of struggle with the radicals?
On one hand, I think they are very determined in fighting against the terror. That's I think against the more the fatal or the violent manifestation of the militancy. But on the other hand, they try to include the radicals, to propagate their own ideas, I think to somehow to control the education or to propagate, the counter message to the radicalism and to build democracy. I think that to propagate the idea of tolerance and religious pluralism, it's very interesting. There is a real progress, I think.
Do you think that Israel can learn some lessons from the young Muslim democracy in Indonesia?
I think it's a different context. I think that's I'm not sure that's the context I think to compare or think to be a model, but it's very interesting, I think, to be inspired or to be open and somehow to cooperate with it. I think it can then be very helpful, but the problem is that now the difficulties coming from the Indonesian side that refuse to the idea of having diplomatic relations with Israel.
Yeah. Well, on this, it's not entirely pessimistic note, we'll have to wrap up. Dr. Giora Eliraz, specializing in the Muslim periphery, research fellow at the Harry S. Truman Institute for the Advancement of Peace at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and a fellow at the Netherlands Institute of Southeast Asian and Caribbean Studies, and the IDC in Herzliya, of course. Yeah, a long and illustrious list. Giora, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
That was the Tel Aviv Review for this week. Thank you very much for listening. Also, big thanks to our guests and, of course, Leo Peleg, the technical producer of this show. Join us again next week for another edition of the Tel Aviv Review. Until then, do not forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and do not hesitate to write with your comments and suggestions to gilad@tlv1.fm. Thank you so much. Have a brilliant week, and we'll be here again next week.
מטה למעלה, מרכבות סתומות הולכות ומתגלגלות. כל נעימות עולה ויורד, הולך ומשוטט בעולם. כל שופר נמשך בעומקי המדרגות, מסובב הגלגל סביב. כל גלגל המתגלגל ממטה למעלה, מרכבות סתומות הולכות ומתגלגלות. כל נעימות עולה ויורד, הולך ומשוטט בעולם. כל שופר נמשך בעומקי המדרגות, מסובב הגלגל סביב. כל
מטה למעלה מרכבות סתומות הולכות ומתגלגלות כל נעימות עולה ויורד הולך ומשוטט בעולם כל שופר נמשך בעומקי המדרגות מסובב הגלגל סביב